Meet Oscar, the cat that predicts death and provides comfort. Sometimes, doesn't it seem like our pets know us better than ourselves? When we're feeling even a little bit down, our dogs and cats are there to pick us up. However, some pets seem to have even more uncanny abilities. Take Oscar the cat, for instance. When the cat first arrived at Steer House, a nursing home and rehabilitation center, it took a while for Oscar to come out of his shell. However, as time went on, Oscar started to grow closer to particular patients. Soon enough, doctors and nurses at Steer House realized that Oscar had what some have described as supernatural powers. Even today, doctors from around the world have a hard time explaining Oscar the cat's extraordinary, predictive powers. A decade ago, Steer House, a nursing home and rehabilitation center in Providence, Rhode Island, decided to bring some animals into its halls. You see, there are proven therapeutic benefits to animal companionship, especially for those who are recovering from illness or facing their older years. So, the staff at the nursing home started to prepare the property for the arrival of their live-in therapy fluffies. It took quite a while for the home to become ready for the pets. After all, they wanted the cats to roam wherever they wanted, including the Haven Advanced Care Area, the Dementia Care Unit. Soon enough, however, the nursing home felt prepared for the animals. Now all that was left was to pick up the cats. When the Steer House was finally ready for the pets, they brought in 2 kittens, Oscar and Maya. At the same time, they also started allowing visitors to bring in their pets as well. Despite the other animals that come in from time to time, Maya made herself at home in no time. Within just a few weeks, it was not uncommon at all to see Maya playing with the staff or napping with the permanent residents. However, it took longer for Oscar the cat to become accustomed to his new home. But, once the laid-back cat came out of his shell, he would take the world by storm. As Oscar slowly became accustomed to his new home, the Steer House started to worry about him a little bit. How could he help patients if he didn't want to be around them? He wouldn't really like to come out. He would keep to himself. Oftentimes you'd find him in the supply closet or under a bed somewhere, and it wasn't really until somebody was near death that Oscar would sort of come out front and center, recalled Dr. Sosa, seen in the photo, one of the doctors at the nursing home. Thankfully, Oscar the cat did eventually come around to his new home. However, even once he started appearing in the halls and room, Oscar still liked to stay on his own, rarely asking for pets or cuddling up to anyone. Then, one day, the cat did something that no one could have expected. One seemingly ordinary day, the nurses at Steer House found something interesting. They walked down a hallway and found Oscar crying to enter a patient's room and pawing at the door. As Oscar had never shown any interest in that room before, the nurses did not understand why he wanted to get inside so badly. However, soon enough, they would discover why Oscar wanted to get into that particular room. The moment Oscar entered, he started sniffing around, intrigued by his new surroundings. But, after another moment, Oscar the cat jumped up onto the patient's bed. With a tuck of his tail, the feline curled up at the end of the bed. The nurses could hardly believe it. Oscar had never acted like that before. But what happened next would surprise them even more. The next day, Oscar returned to the same patient's room and curled up onto the bed again. And again the next day. Then, the heartbreaking happened. The patient that Oscar the cat had been warming up to passed away in the night. As you might imagine, the nurses felt worse than before. Finally, after all this time, Oscar had started to warm up to someone. Now, that person had passed away. Thankfully, soon enough, Oscar started warming up to someone else. It looked like the feline was ready to move on and start making other friends in the nursing home. That was the whole reason the staff brought him in, after all. That's when things started to get very, very strange, however. Over the coming weeks, Oscar the cat started making some new friends. Still, the nurses could not help but notice something rather strange. The feline only liked to warm up to one person a day. But when staff members started looking at the data, they discovered something even more peculiar. It seemed that Oscar only started cuddling with patients just a few days before they passed away. That's right. It was as though the cat had the uncanny ability to predict when someone would die. Of course, like almost all other workplaces, the staff of the nursing home loved gossiping with one another. So, soon enough, word of Oscar the cat's predictive power started to make its way around the home. And one doctor decided to get to the bottom of Oscar's abilities. Were they fake, or something supernatural? The doctor in question was Dr. David Dosa. Over the years, Dr. Dosa has worked at some of the most prestigious hospitals, colleges, and nursing homes in Rhode Island. In addition to the Steer House, the doctor works as a geriatrician at Rhode Island Hospital and an assistant professor of medicine at the Warren Alpert Medical School at Brown University. So, no questions asked, he was the man to get to the bottom of Oscar the cat and his mysterious powers. How would Dr. Dosa do it? He planned to not only look at the data, but also follow Oscar the cat around, observing his daily life. Ultimately, the doctor could hardly believe what he discovered. When Dr. Dosa arrived for his first day of following Oscar the cat around, he found the feline in one of his favorite spots, napping on top of the nurse's station. After a while, Oscar got up, stretched, and Dr. Dosa could swear that he was actually considering his next move. That's when an older woman, known as Mrs. P, passed by the nurse's station. Without warning, Oscar let out a gentle hiss, a rattlesnake-like warning that said, "Leave me alone." It seems that Oscar did not want to cuddle with Mrs. P that day. However, as Dr. Dosa would soon discover, that was excellent news for Mrs. P. Hey, all hospital workers need to care for themselves, even Oscar the cat. So before making his daily rounds, just like a doctor, he needs to put a little something in his belly. So, before heading to the dementia unit, Oscar always stops by the nurse's station to say hello to the staff, as well as eat and drink a little from his bowls. Then, finally, it came time for Dr. David Dosa to see what he had come to the Steer House to observe, Oscar's daily rounds. The cat started to walk down the nursing home hallways and living rooms, sniffing the air, as if searching for something. As you might imagine, Oscar the cat entering a room is not always a good thing. However, the staff and patients of the nursing home have come to understand that he's just trying to help. So, as Dr. Dosa followed Oscar around, his heart sank a little when the cat seemed to head straight for the door of a very elderly patient, Mrs. T. You see, when Oscar visited Mrs. T's room that day, she had not spoken a single word in nearly a week. Even worse, she spent almost all of her days sleeping. Mrs. T's daughter had even started to come in every day, believing the end was near. With a heavy heart, Dr. Dosa watched as Oscar slipped into Mrs. T's room. But then something strange happened. Oscar the cat entered Mrs. T's room and looked around. Watching from the door, Dr. Dosa saw as Mrs. T's daughter patted Oscar on the head. "Hello, Oscar," Mrs. T's daughter said. "How are you today?" But the feline paid her no mind. Instead, he simply looked at Mrs. T, surveying her, while sniffing the air. Then, just as quickly as he had entered the room, Oscar went right back out the door. Incredibly, a few days later, Mrs. T ended up pulling through. It was as though Oscar had known that it was not her time. Of course, that was not enough to prove that the cat had special powers. So, Dr. Dosa continued to follow Oscar around. Heading back into the hallway, Oscar the cat then made his way down to room 313. There, the feline and Dr. Dosa found elderly Mrs. K, lying in her bed, asleep. After taking a quick sniff of the air, Oscar jumped up onto the bed, turned around twice, and then curled up beside Mrs. K. Could Oscar be using his perceptive powers once again, wondered Dr. Dosa. A few hours passed, and Oscar remained with Mrs. K the entire time. After a while, a nurse walked into the room and noticed Oscar. Without thinking twice, she rushed to the nurse's station and started calling Mrs. K's family. But how would they react when they heard an ordinary, or not so ordinary, cat had predicted the older woman's passing? Believe it or not, the family of Mrs. K trusted Oscar the cat. That's right. Within an hour, the family of Mrs. K started to arrive at Steer House. Dr. Dosa could hardly believe what he saw. All of the family members loved and trusted Oscar, who sat purring at the end of the bed. At one point, Mrs. K's grandson asked, "What is the cat doing here?" Fighting back tears, his mother, Mrs. K's daughter, explained, "He is here to help Grandma get to heaven." No questions asked, the staff, patients, and patients' families all trusted Oscar the cat. However, Dr. Dosa could not allow the heart-wrenching scene to sway him. He needed to remain unbiased and analytic. But even this scientist could not explain what happened next. Within just 30 minutes of the last of Mrs. K's family arriving at the nursing home, she took her last breath. Almost immediately, after receiving a few pets on the head from the deceased woman's family members, Oscar the cat jumped down off the bed, as if he knew his job was done. Following that, Oscar took a quick drink of water and then headed back to the nurse's station, ready for a nice long nap. Dr. Dosa could hardly believe his eyes. He had seen Oscar's predictive powers for himself. Now, he needed to know if it was all real, or if it was just a 1 in a million chance. So, Dr. Dosa started to look into the feline's numbers. And the more he looked, the more impressed the doctor became. After looking at the data, Dr. Dosa could only believe one thing: Oscar the cat doesn't make many mistakes. He seems to understand when patients are about to die, he explained to the Associated Press news agency. So far, he has presided over the deaths of more than 25 residents on the 3rd floor of Steer House Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Providence, Rhode Island, Dr. Dosa explained. His mere presence at the bedside is viewed by physicians and nursing home staff as an almost absolute indicator of impending death, allowing staff members to adequately notify families. For his work, he is highly regarded by the staff at Steer House and by the families of the residents whom he serves. But Oscar the cat's incredible story does not end there. After Oscar the cat helped prepare over 30 people go through their passing, he earned an award for his work. He earned a plaque that now hangs in the Steer House hallways that reads, "For his compassionate hospice care." This plaque is awarded to Oscar the cat. It's not that the cat is consistently there first, explained Dr. Joan Tenno, another physician at Steer House. But the cat always does manage to make an appearance, and it always seems to be in the last 2 hours. Soon enough, thousands around the world would be talking about Oscar, all thanks to one article in the New England Journal of Medicine. Wanting the world to know more about Oscar the cat, Dr. Dosa decided to write an essay about the feline, entitled "A Day in the Life of Oscar the Cat." On a whim, he decided to submit the piece to the New England Journal of Medicine. However, he didn't expect them to publish it. After all, the journal is better known for its scientific reports on the medical world. But the journal decided to share it with the world. "I was quite surprised they agreed to publish it," Dr. Dosa told WebMD in an interview. "It is not usually the type of article they will publish." Soon enough, many around the world had theories on how Oscar managed to make his predictions. Of course, Dr. Dosa has his own theories on how Oscar the cat makes his daily decisions. He thinks that it's very possible that the feline might smell something unique on people that are passing away, something that humans are not equipped to smell. "I don't think Oscar is that unique, but he is in a unique environment," Dr. Dosa explained. "Animals are remarkable in their ability to see things we don't, be it the dog that sniffs out cancer or the fish that predicts earthquakes. Animals know when they are needed." Meanwhile, as you might imagine, animal experts have their own opinions. Animal experts are not convinced that Oscar is narrowing in on some spiritual or supernatural vibe. Instead, they think it's incredibly plausible that he's smelling something that we can't. "I suspect he is smelling some chemical released just before dying," says Margie Skerk, a veterinarian and president of the American Association of Feline Practitioners. "Cats can smell a lot of things we can't." Meanwhile, Daniel Estep, a certified applied animal behaviorist, thinks it might be even more straightforward than that. "One of the things that happen with people who are dying is that they are not moving around much. Maybe the cat is picking up on the fact that the person on the bed is very quiet," Estep said in an interview with CBS News. "It may not be smell or sounds, but just the lack of movement." Still, not everyone agrees that Oscar is a fantastic cat. As you might imagine, there are still many naysayers, although, as of this writing, Oscar the cat has helped over 100 people cross over to the other side. "We don't know Oscar's success rate," Daniel Inber wrote in Slate. "Does anyone keep track of the number of times he nuzzles people who don't die? And we can't separate out causes, effects, and correlations." Instead, Inber argues that Oscar is an example of confirmation bias. In case you don't know, confirmation bias is the tendency of people to favor information that confirms their existing beliefs or hypotheses. However, through it all, the New England Journal of Medicine has stood by their decision to publish Dr. Dosa's paper. Even when put on blast by the like of Slate, the New England Journal of Medicine has stood by their decision to publish Dr. David Dosa's personal essay. "From time to time, we publish such personal narratives by physician writers," the journal explained in a recent email. However, the support for Oscar the cat and Dr. Dosa's work has mostly been positive. While there are a few naysayers, many more support them. In fact, the support was so strong that Dr. Dosa decided to continue his work with Oscar. And, since then, it has been incredibly rewarding for both of them. Dr. Dosa's continued work with Oscar the cat ultimately led him to write an amazing book, Making Rounds with Oscar. I wanted to write a book that would go beyond Oscar's peculiarities, to tell why he is important to family members and caregivers who have been with him at the end of a life, Dr. Dosa said during his book tour. As you might imagine, readers loved the book. I used to work in a nursing home and studied gerontology for a few years. If you have anyone in your family or circle of acquaintances who has someone in their home or a friend who suffers from dementia, this book is a must-read for all involved, wrote one very impressed reviewer. Now, thanks to his incredible powers, Oscar the cat has also become something of a pop culture icon. After Oscar the cat made headlines all around the world, it wasn't long before he started popping up in movies and television. For instance, does the premise of a particular episode of the medical drama House, Here Kitty, sound familiar? Nurse Morgan West is convinced she's dying because prophetic cat Debbie from the senior home where she works came to her. In the episode, Debbie does exactly what Oscar does in real life, falling asleep on the bed of someone who will soon pass. But House is not the only media in which an Oscar-alike would pop up. When famed horror author Stephen King heard the story of Oscar the cat, he knew he needed to write a book with him as a character. I thought to myself, I want to write a story about that, he explained. And then I made the connection with Danny Torrance as an adult, working in a hospice. I thought, that's it. I'm gonna write this book. The cat had to be there. As you may have guessed from the quote, Oscar the cat, renamed Azzy, appears in the sequel to The Shining, titled Dr. Sleep. The book debuted in 2013, instantly becoming a bestseller. It was then made into a popular film of the same title, starring Ewan McGregor. But that's not the only time Oscar will head to the silver screen. Soon, many are hoping to see Oscar take his medical rounds to the big screen. That's right, Hollywood plans to make an Oscar the Cat movie. Screenwriters Stephen Lindsay, Hatchie, A Dog's Tale, and Luis Ugaz, Christmas in Conway, are planning on adapting Making Rounds with Oscar into a feature film. While the film sounds great, there is a bit of bad news. The screenwriters and Variety announced the movie back in 2010. Since then, however, there has been little movement on the film. Meanwhile, back in Rhode Island, Oscar continues to make his daily rounds. Whatever you believe about Oscar the cat, there's no question that he brings joy to all the people at Steer House. Though at times he has been caught sleeping on the job, Oscar continues to hold vigils for departing patients, mostly to the delight of family members struggling to deal with the death of their loved ones. He continues to be mentioned routinely in obituaries and during funeral services, Dr. Dosa wrote on Steer House's website. Of course, this is far from the only time that a pet has exhibited what some might call supernatural behavior. Just like Oscar the cat, Keola, and Akita Inu, sensed something wrong with her owner.